Hello again, my internet-attached friends. I am Blunty, and did you even imagine that Sony, that PlayStation, were even close to done with shooting themselves in the foot yet? Because I'm here to promise you, they're not. They've got just it's cases and cases and cases, cabinets even. Just entire warehouses filled with foot bullets, armor-piercing foot bullets, and they're ready to use them. So, a few hours ago, Nixie's Software, the Sony-owned dev studio behind the PC port of Ghost of Tsushima, and previously a bunch of other PlayStation PC ports like Spider-Man Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank and all that, announced launch details for Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut on PC. And for the people with a bug up their bum about the whole PSN account requirement stuff, well, they just got a new talking point. Because it turns out the PlayStation account system actually breaks a whole chunk of the game for one particular increasingly popular PC gaming platform that people love to talk about. And they will. And quite frankly, it might just be the most convincing argument yet for arguing that the PSN requirement should not be something basic features get locked behind. So first off the bat, with the announcement, they confirmed it's a global launch with no regionally based time zone rollout stuff. Everyone gets it at the same time, which is actually pretty normal for games on Steam, but it's always nice to have it confirmed all the same. Especially for content creator dorks like me who will be live streaming, it's always nice to know it will be ready to go under my normal stream schedule, just have that confirmed. There's even a handy dandy local time zone infographic for your reference. Secondly, the preload is now live. You can now pre-install the game, weighing in at just over 47 gigabytes. By the time it's unpacked and installed, however, it should soak up 75 gigabytes, at least according to the system spec requirements we've had available for some time now. But then we come to the Steam Deck, and in fact all Linux-based Steam gamers, and this is where we get to the broken crap I spoke about just a minute ago. And we start off well enough with this, it seems like good news. We're happy to share that the single-player experience, including the Iki Island expansion, can be enjoyed on Steam Deck and similar handheld gaming PCs, as we've worked extensively to optimize performance and deliver the best possible experience on these devices. You'll notice the softly voiced but very specific single-player caveat there. And oh, you may think to yourself, perhaps there's some kind of extra performance hit in the multiplayer mode that the Steam Deck just can't quite handle at satisfactory frame rates or something. It's hardly a monster of a machine after all. But no, that's not it at all, which we discover in the very next paragraph. You may notice that Steam marks the game as unsupported for Steam Deck. This is due to the Legends co-op multiplayer mode requiring Windows to access PlayStation Network integrated features. And there it is. While the SteamOS and Linux experience for the game is handled, like almost every other game on Steam Deck is, via not a bespoke specific Linux port, but instead the shockingly effective Proton compatibility layer. To the layperson, think of it as emulating some of Windows's guts so the game just works properly on Linux and never even notices it's actually on Linux. It's not that. Just to be clear, it is not a Windows emulator, and any nerd worth his salt will flinch when you call it a Windows emulator. I'm one of them. But for the non-technically minded, it's close enough to describe it that way so you can wrap your head around it. The game runs on the Steam Deck via Proton. And they've specifically worked to fine-tune it so that it works well there. Fantastic. And time will tell on that, of course. Keep an eye on your favorite deck-focused content creators for actual performance numbers and recommended settings and all that sort of stuff. And I will, of course, be testing it on my Windows-based PC gaming handheld, the ROG Ally. But on Steam Deck, it hits the same issue that was once notorious for breaking games that otherwise should run fine. Like, there's no reason they shouldn't run, but they were just broken. And that is third-party middleware. For a long time, it was almost exclusively an issue with various DRM and anti-cheat type systems that broke crap on Steam Deck for no good reason, other than the fact that the DRM middleware and anti-cheat middleware wouldn't work on Linux or work through Proton. just by the very nature of its low-level operating requirements. Anti-cheat and DRM has to operate at a very low system level, and that kind of stuff does not work through Proton. That, however, has mostly been fixed these days, with Linux native options for most of the major and most common DRM and anti-cheat crapware. These days, multiplayer games on Steam Deck is pretty solid. That issue was addressed, and it was fixed, for the most part. But that's not what this is. The PC PlayStation overlay is not DRM, and it's not anti-cheat. It's there to tie in a bunch of PlayStation account stuff, like trophies, and rather more key here, cross-platform multiplayer linking and associated services like friends lists and voice chat. Sony, it seems, can't be arsed having a Linux-compatible version ready to go on day one, which is mildly ironic for those of us who understand that the PlayStation 5's own operating system is based on a FreeBSD core, a Unix-like derivative, which is quite a lot closer to Linux than it is to Windows. And again, yes, fellow nerds, I know they're not the same thing, of course. FreeBSD and Linux are separate things, but it is still kind of amusing in a very dorky way. They're close relatives. A lot closer than Windows is. But anyway, now, when it comes to spending the money and person hours to make the PSN overlay for PC Linux compatible, despite the Steam Deck making Linux gaming a lot more mainstream than it was just a couple of years back and selling a few million devices, it is also prudent and practical to look at the actual reality here. Because while I'm sure some of you out there are foaming at the mouth with excitement to have another thing to screech at Sony about when it comes to the PSN stuff and how angry you are about it, the fact on the ground is, and I do mean fact, Linux gamers, that's Steam Deck users and every other Linux install being used for gaming with Steam, still, today, only account for less than 2% of active gamers according to the latest Steam hardware survey. So, on the business side of things, it would be very hard to justify the work and expense for that 2% of the potential market out there. That said, if I were making the decisions, I would have still made sure it worked, just for the sake of the positive press it would have brought alone. See, Steam Deck gamers might be a comparatively small group, but they do sure seem to be frequent articles and other, content published around it. Every single high-profile game release, there's always chatter about, does it work on Steam Deck? How well does it work on Steam Deck? Here is how well it works on Steam Deck. Here are the recommended settings. There's a bunch of stuff flooding out every single time a game releases. I don't have a Steam Deck. Valve don't even sell them to Aussies for whatever reason. So I don't even go looking for the news about this stuff, but I always come across it anyway, every time. That's how high profile it is. That's how frequent it is in gaming circles to come across this stuff. And the gaming news headlines today, and for the next couple of days at least, will read, another screw up from Sony, another embarrassment for Sony. Sony does dumb thing again. Steam Deck players left out in the cold. Now, of course, PSN being broken on Ghost of Tsushima for Steam Deck, meaning multiplayer is completely unavailable, is a two-edged sword. Because while I'm sure, again, screechers will leap on this news as a new weapon to use, as a rail against PSN requirements at all, it won't be hard to find these exact same screechers just a couple of days ago, at most, screeching about how PSN is pointless because they didn't want to play the multiplayer mode anyway, so they never needed it in the first place. Why is it a requirement? I don't want to play multiplayer. And a reminder, the PSN login for Ghost has always been completely optional for the entirety of the game, everything except the multiplayer stuff. So if you weren't planning on playing multiplayer, you didn't have to use PSN anyway. But, facts don't matter to screechers quite often. But, my point is, be careful with your goalpost shifting and hypocrisy, little screechers, because you're in a minefield now. If you start shifting your argument to this new information, just have a careful think about what you were saying a few days ago, maybe. Oh, and one final annoyance for the rest of us. It seems the system isn't even working properly yet at all anyway. Even native on Windows. Legends, that is the multiplayer mode, will be functional on PC at launch, but you won't be automatically matched with players on different platforms. Crossplay will launch in beta, meaning you can try it out by inviting your PlayStation Network friends. So the whole point of the thing, after all of this fuss, it doesn't work properly for the one reason it actually exists: to be useful, to facilitate seamless matchmaking and multiplayer across platforms. It's pointless. Man, look, Sony, mate, Sony, how many foot bullets does your foot gun even hold? Are foot bullet magazines that large even legal to have? There has to be some sort of legal limit on just how many foot bullets you can have all at once in your foot gun. Just seems like the responsible thing to have. There should be a law against that many foot bullets. But there's probably a joke here to make about, various American socio-political issues, but I'm too highbrow to make them. Hello, American friends. Hope you're doing well. Because, yeah, let's not get into it. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty. Thank you as always to the patrons scrolling up above there, and I will catch you next time.